So it's recording, right?
All right. Pretty magical, right?
Yeah. It always feels a bit awkward.
It always feels weird when you start with the recording. You're like, okay, are we starting now? Or
Should we start?
sure, let's start and see where things go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a British Audiophile. And today I'm joined with Brian from E-acoustics. And this is going to be my first podcast. It's going to be available on my channel, but it's also going to be available on E-acoustics. Brian, do you want to say a little bit about where people can find it?
Sure. Well, they can find us. Well, first, I want to thank you for having me on as a guest. Thank you, Taryn. I'm Brian Mitchell. I'm the founder of Ecoustics.com. It's an online magazine. We've been publishing for nearly 22 years, which is kind of hard to believe. Started it back in the 90s, but now we're covering everything: hi-fi, home theater, headphones, and music.
Wow.
Yeah, we have nearly 80 articles per week right now. Phenomenal new staff.
80 articles a week.
A lot going on. And Taryn's contributed too. So I do want to recommend people go find his article. He has kind of the origin of his channel. If you haven't heard that yet, that's a good article and some background on Taryn. And maybe I'll ask him some of those same questions today. And then there's also a pretty good one on active versus passive speakers, which is another always interesting topic to talk about.
I need to do some more. I'm just spinning plates.
But so yeah, thank you. Yeah.
We know each other through E-acoustics and me obviously writing a couple of articles. And we've been saying that we're going to do this for a while. So it's great to be able to do it finally.
Yeah, we've had a few conversations and we kept saying, let's do it. And we're finally recording. So grateful to be on your channel, A British Audiophile. Watched nearly all your videos, and they're always informative and interesting. So
oh, thank you. And also likewise, I've enjoyed your podcasts. How long have you been doing those podcasts now?
Oh, right. We are now up to 8 podcasts as the time of this recording. We have another handful already been recording that should be coming out in the next coming weeks. But yeah, the podcasts are a lot of fun. They're the kind of audio version of this video chat, and you'll meet more of the Ecoustics team, editor-in-chief Ian White, Lauren Halliday, known as the Record Lady. And then we have 2 guys into vintage audio. They call themselves, or one of them is the Budget Audiophiler on Instagram. And then the other one, Eric Pye, is another vintage guru. So, and I know you're into vintage stuff too, Taryn.
Yeah.
And
hard to get hold of good vintage gear, isn't it? You need to know where to go to get it. But I've got some stuff that's been knocking around for a while. So I think it's classifies. I think even my ProAc and exposures might be knocking on the door of being vintage.
Right. I mean, you have
those. See most of the stuff that I get in for review though, so can't be too bad.
Right. I think, if I'm not wrong, you've been comparing all your new bookshelf speakers to your ProAc speakers, right? From 19, what's the year on those?
1998, I think I bought them.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and they've probably been around since the mid-90s. But I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I have been doing this for about 18 months. And you hear stuff at shows and you hear stuff at dealer demos and things like that. And they sound impressive, but you need to get them home to find out what's what. And I really didn't know what to expect, whether those ProAcs were just going to be old news. And I thought a couple of speakers I got in, I got the Bookart S400s pretty early on, and then the ATC SCM19s, which I thought were a little bit cleaner sounding. But the ProAcs are a little bit more romantic sounding, and I'm probably a romantic at heart. I prefer them. But there wasn't a huge difference between the brand new ATCs and my 22-year-old ProAcs. So I thought they'd get blown out of the water, you know.
Right.
Technology, if you look at the engineering stuff that's gone on in the last 20 years, I thought, yeah, these aren't going to be up to much. by today's standards, but no, I was wrong.
So when
still holding up very.
So when you bought them 23 years ago, were they everything that you, I guess the better way of asking that, were they your dream speaker at the time? And did you expect to be, and did you expect to have them this long?
No, I didn't expect to have them this long, but at the time it was a stretch to get them. I think they were £1,200 in the standard finish. I used to sell them, so I used to kind of work periodically in my late teens and early 20s at a hi-fi store, and they were the British little compact monitor speaker to have.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole response range at the time was quite sought after, but the 1SE's got quite a bit of attention.
Right.
And it was a bit of a stretch, I remember, at the time, to go for a £1,200 speaker. But I saved up, got them, was delighted. And the U finish, I got them in the U finish, which is a little bit more. I think it was £1,400. And then when I got back into this, because I took a little bit of a break in my 30s and to focus on other things. When I got back into it, the current ProAx, I was surprised as to how little they've changed. The DB, I think it's the DB1's the current version, which retails for £2,000, and it looks almost identical. It's just different drivers.
Right.
But I haven't got around to reviewing it. They stick with their established routes to get their products for review. So I haven't got my on that yet.
It's pretty crazy that your favorite speaker of all time right now that's been updated, and you haven't been able to review the most recent version.
Well, I think a lot of the British brands don't still understand what YouTube is. I think, why the hell would I send it to someone on YouTube? I've got various applications that they'll send it to E-acoustics, I'm sure, because you've been around for 22 years, but it's changing a little bit, but it takes a little bit of time. I don't think we're as quite far along the process as people in America. I get the impression. I talk to sometimes some of the other guys who do this over in the States, and there seems to be the manufacturers have caught on to the fact that YouTube is a significant space to be in as far as getting their products out and making sure people are aware of them. But manufacturers here, some it's changed. Right. Some of them are, but a lot of the smaller ones wouldn't know who or have any interest in YouTube.
Yeah, well, I'm doing the reverse in a sense. Like, I haven't been on YouTube, so I'm grateful to be appearing maybe for the first time on YouTube on your channel. So thank you for that, Taryn. And I'm coming back. We've been an online publication for so long, but it's just like you said, YouTube is the place to be right now. A lot of guys into hi-fi and a lot of people that are interested are on YouTube, and you've done extremely well with your channel. I'm curious, how would you define the difference between British audio and American audio? Or
well, I think I called it a British audiophile because a lot of the gear that I had traditionally was British gear, and there was something known as the British sound. I think you guys over that side of the pond used to laugh at us because it was just no bass, was it? It was all mid-range. They said, "Where's the bass gone?" And that was traditionally the British sound. It was very mid-centric, very natural sounding. The ProAx, the BBC LS3 5A, that's the kind of granddaddy. But the Harbus, the ProAx, and all of these, even the ATCs from all these other companies, have kind of, that was the sound. There was not much bass. I think there's a phrase, forget what it was, no bass, no highs, something like that. We've got small houses with small rooms. We can't put big speakers in there.
Right.
You can't put big whacking floor standards to go full range. But I think globalization and the reality is that people, even British brands, produce speakers now for all the different types of markets, and there isn't necessarily a British sound so much these days. Right.
There's more, maybe each brand has a unique sound. Would you say that?
Well, I think that's converged. I think higher up you go, that seems to be more the case. But a lot of the stuff that you get around £500-600, you know, a lot of the electronic stuff, say maybe even below £1,000, sounds very similar. I think, you know, they've got very even tonal balances. They, you know, you don't get those slow sounding amplifiers. I remember I had an Arcam amplifier. I can't remember the model. I think it was one of the Alpha range, and they were very good in the mid range, but the bass was so woolly. The highs will roll off. They were slow. Couldn't deal with transients. You know, you get an Iota VXSA3 or the Audiolab 6000A, or, you know, the NAD C338. They all do a very good job and are fairly tonally neutral. You're trying to pick out relatively subtle differences. There are differences, but they seem to have all converged into kind of what is a fairly well-balanced sound. I don't think that was the case 20, 30 years ago, even with affordable gear.
Right. So things have gotten more affordable, and you've focused on, I think, the 2,000 to 3,000 pound speaker range. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
or 1,000 pounds.
Yeah, I've done a lot around the 2,000 to 3,000 pound speaker range, and that was because it started by accident. Started the channel. Mads Bukart was the first guy who reached out to me and said, "Actually, Taryn, would you review these?" And they were similar price to the Proax. Proax at the time, I think there's been a recent price increase, hasn't there, across the board? But I think they've gone up above 2,000. But the Proax were 2,000 and the Bukarts were 1,700 quid. So I thought that's kind of a direct competitor. Right. Let's see what that's like. And then the ATCs were just a little bit over £2,000. So then I thought, actually, let's see what's out there. I wanted to, this kind of, at that time, it was a secret mission to see, well, let's actually see what's out there. I've got lots of reference. Sometimes people say to me, why don't you go and review this speaker at £10,000 or that at £6,000? And I'll get to reviewing those. I've heard those systems. It's not like I haven't heard them before, but you need to have a lot of reference points around the price point. I need to know, before I know what a £10,000 speaker does, I need to know what all £5,000-6,000 speaker does. So I'm very with speakers around £2,000 or £3,000. I've heard a lot of them at home, auditioned them, know what they deliver. I'm at the stage now where I feel comfortable enough. I do things very slowly.
Take it slow.
Yeah, I'm at the point now where I can sit there and think, well, actually, yeah, no, I can have a look at something which is 5-6K and fairly accurately assess what that is, you know, in terms of value, what that represents. Whereas if you suddenly jump from £2,000 to £10,000, yeah, if it's made well and it's not, you know, it's done properly, it should sound better. But can I really quantify whether it's really good within its own segment? You need a lot of reference points, maybe not at the same level, but around that level to be able to do it properly. Don't know if that makes any sense to anybody but me, though.
No, I mean, it's hard. I don't think people understand how hard it is to review and explain something on YouTube. You listen to the stuff in comparison to what you have, and then you try to explain it in a way that, like, how do you explain sound? It's not the easiest thing, and you're quite eloquent with it, but you use a lot of interesting words that on the warm side of neutral, you might say, or on the cool side. How do you give some more description to that? Or is the person just supposed to understand, I know what warm means, I know what cool means?
Yeah, I suppose you've got to find some kind of analogy, haven't you, to describe what you're hearing. So for me, the warm side is kind of a slightly richer sounding speaker, and the cooler side is slightly more dry sounding speaker. But there's different ways. And that's one of the challenges, really, is that once you've done it a few times, how do you find a way of describing it that isn't exactly the same way, using the same and I try and get away from too much of the flowery language, because I think that then starts to kind of put a barrier between you and your audience in terms of them trying to understand what you're trying to say. If you're trying to flower it up too much, just try and keep it relatively straightforward when it comes to describing sound. There are audiophile terms. I do sometimes explain if, for example, imaging. I think sometimes people have different understanding of what imaging is. Well, for me, it's the actual location of instruments within the soundstage. But soundstage and imaging are almost used together, because I think they mean slightly different things. So sometimes I'll explain, actually, do you know what, this means this, and I try not to be too repetitive, but the reality is, unless you're going to start flowering it up and find lots of very fancy ways of describing things, which is not really what I'm about, you do wind up saying similar things after that. If products sound similar, you wind up saying similar things.
Right. Well, I think what's interesting that you do that a lot of other reviewers don't do is you do comparisons, and that helps differentiate between which one's a little bit better and which one not necessarily worse, but has a different characteristic that may appeal to different people. And you explain that back to what you were saying on the dry and the warm. And is dry always bad, or can dry be good?
No, it's just describing a tonal characteristic. There's something that's neutral. There's something that can be a little bit richer, has a little bit more harm. I mean, if you're putting it in very kind of objectivist type of language, you'd say it has a little bit more harmonic richness. Normally it's that second order harmonics that it's emphasizing. Something that's leaner and drier will have less of that characteristic. But you do try and, like I say, flesh it out a little bit without trying to, otherwise you start sounding like, it sounds like audiophile BS, doesn't it?
Right.
So there's a balancing act in it. But the comparison thing, that's because, there have been reviews where there's products which there's people, and this is not just on YouTube, this is in print magazines and everything else, where people wax so lyrically about a product, and you're thinking, this guy absolutely loves this, but he hasn't compared it to anything. And I'm always a little bit cynical of those. I always think, well, if you haven't said that what it's better than, what it's worse than, in which ways, then how can I put any credibility to what you're saying?
Right. Well, yeah. One of the other things that happens in reviews all the time is they will say, if it's a $2,000 speaker, let's say, oh, it's better than every $10,000 speaker, or they will just say something, but they haven't listened to every $10,000 speaker. They'll just kind of say that, oh, it's great value. It's, how do you address, or how do you kind of read through reviews like that? Do you just discount them altogether?
Yeah, it's just entertainment, isn't it? Then it's you can only compare it to what you've got at hand at home at the same time. You can make some general references. So for example, if I've got the chord mojo as a reference, and I look at the Aries, and then I had the Pontus. So I've done 2 Denafrips DACs reviews. I did the Aries, and that was better than my chord mojo. And then the Pontus came in, and that was considerably better than mine. So I could conclude, if A is better than B and D is a lot better than B, I can conclude that C is better than A. Right.
Well, for people that don't know what those products are, those are DACs, digital to analog converters. And I'm fascinated as to why there should be a difference between a digital to analog conversion. Like, that's what we're talking about here, not a speaker, not an amplifier. We're talking about converting a digital signal to the audio waveform that you can hear through your speakers.
Well, this is where you get into a little bit of hot water, isn't it? This hardline objectivists will tell you that actually, once you've got once you buy something like a topping D90, whatever it is, SE, or a top of line SMSL, their measurements are off the chart, and that's as good as it gets. But I think I can, it's not in my head, I can hear differences between, a good Delta Sigma chip-based DAC and things that are, things have got different topologies. Not necessarily that's the limiting factor, but I'm not sure that we can hear or that we can measure everything that we perceive. I know that our measurements are more accurate and more precise in certain ways, but I'm not sure. And I did that cable, which that was another
Right.
another can of worms to open. Did that cable comparison, and I didn't know what to find. Really, I didn't know what to expect. Really, for all I
Right.
knew, those 3 Pro Audio cables would sound better than my 800-pound cord signature cable, and the only reason why the audiophile cable sounded different was because they're poorly engineered. I would have been quite happy to report that conclusion if that was the case, and I'm sure it is the case sometimes,
Right.
but there was no conclusive proof that sorry, well, actually, it's the conclusive proof. It would be that. Let me see, how can I say this without offending people? The objective test that was done by my wife proved that she could hear a difference. I felt subjectively, when I evaluated the cables, that I could hear a difference. Even the 3 Pro Audio cables that measure the same as each other sounded different, but more expensive is not always necessarily better. And even my chord signature, which came out top on that test with the highest score, because I evaluated them in 14 different categories, didn't sound better than all the other cables with every track I tested. So the result was that cables that measured the same didn't sound the same.
Right. Well, I gotta commend you there. 14 characteristics of a cable, like that in itself is a very in-depth testing to be able to decipher sonic differences between cables on 14 different
levels. It's probably the 4 different categories that I look for sonic differences on anything. It's just basically bass weight, bass extension, how snappy, how tight that bass is. Similar with mid-range, mid-range. Same with the top end, soundstage, imaging, etc., etc. Every single, I don't write down 14 categories, but loosely I have those 14 categories in my mind when I'm reviewing. It's just you have to listen for certain things, don't you?
Right.
And to try and get some kind of objectivity within your subjective realm, to get some kind of some quantifiable difference between this product and that product. Well, I listen specifically for certain traits with certain tracks, and then I move on and I'll try something else. So that's what I do. I think, well, actually what I want to do is I want to find out how tonally accurate this item is, whether it's a cable or it's a component. Let's see how tonally accurate it is. Well, let's play a whole load of jazz music. I like jazz music, but don't just jazz music. Let's play a whole load of jazz music. Let's see what this sax sounds like. Let's see what this trumpet sounds like, grand piano. So then I can tick off that box, say, well, actually, this is fairly tonally accurate, or this is embellishing things a bit on the harmonically rich side, and this one's a little bit drier and not so harmonically rich. So, and then the same with bass, or the various traits of the bass. There's a difference when a kick drum hits. That's something that's quite hard for a system to capture. There's a difference between a douche and a douche, that kind of softening, as if you put like a cloth in between it. So that's transient on the bass that you can listen for. So you just been doing this for 30 years now, so you just learn to, it's like developing your palate with food or anything else. You just learn to listen for certain traits, and you get, the more you do it, and the longer you do it, you get better, hopefully, at picking out those traits. I think everybody hears the same thing. We just think if you've got a bit more experience, and you can explain it a bit better, and you can pick up on the things a little bit quicker. That's all.
Yeah, it's I'm still fascinated on 14 characteristics. It sounds like you do that for every component, whether it's a speaker, an amplifier, a cable, a DAC. That's what you're looking for. But if you swap things out all the time, you're adding in new variables. So you're never exactly comparing a system with the same cable and the same DAC and the same when you are doing swaps, right? Is that?
Well, you swap one at a time. So if I'm testing, I've got my reference system, so I know that my exposures are very, very natural in the mid-range. Got extremely good soundstage depth, a little bit rolled off on the highs, and aren't the last word in terms of speed and attack in the bass. But they have probably the to my ears, they certainly have the best mid-range I've still yet to hear in my room. So I love mid-range. I love a lot of acoustic music. Most of the information is there, so that it's not a perfect amplifier, but I know its tonal characteristics. I've owned it for 22 years, and a similar case with the Proax. So if I'm testing a speaker, I'm going to test it against that initially to see how it's different, and then I'll try it with different components just to see how it matches with different components. So I'm, you've got your reference, haven't you, there, and you just judge against your reference.
So you are keeping as much as you can exactly the same, the cables, the amp, and then if you are testing an amp, you'll just swap out the amp, keep all the same cables, keep the same Proax, and but I think you can get lost or pretty easily get confused the more you swap out two things, swap out three things. It's very easily confusing, I think. I don't think people quite understand that part of it.
Well, I'm testing this Burson timekeeper amp. So everything stays the same in the component other than the amplifier. Now, it's tested first with the Proax, and then I'll find out actually how that does. But the Proax can be a little bit difficult to drive. So then you think, well, actually, there's another speaker that I've tested that's been left here because Subic said, well, I may as well hang on to it for a while. I don't need it immediately. So that's the Amphion Argon ones, which I think are a very good speaker. They're a lot they're tonally a little bit on the cool side. So I'll try, but they're easier to drive than my Proax. So I'll try it with that. And because I've got an indication of the tonal characteristic of that Bursten with my Proax, if I think that it's got a slightly cool balance, I'll stick it with a speaker that's a little bit warmer if I've got one, just to see if I can balance it out. And you eventually try it with a few. You're switching out one component at a time. If you're switching 2 or 3 components at a time, then you're getting into difficulty. You haven't got. But if you switch out one component at a time, then, well, actually, let's try this with my Proax. Right, now let's try the same amplifier with my with the Amphion Argon ones. Let's try it with whatever other speakers you've got at hand. I might try it with half a dozen speakers just to see how it works with all of those. And then there's the variables. There aren't that many variables then.
Well, then I think you bring up the next point is system matching and the importance of matching the right amplifier with the right speaker, and how doing that incorrectly can make 2 otherwise good sounding products independently sound bad, right? So how does a consumer think about this other than they watch your channel and they say, I listen to it with these 2 items, I'm just going to buy those? A lot of times they can't buy. Can they still buy they can't buy the speakers you have anymore or the amps, right?
No,
unless
so
they're
the reason I'm trying it out with lots of different things is to try and get an idea of what's going on with that. First thing is that you want to try and get an idea of I think the first thing you want to know is the tonality of something. What kind of tone does it have? And then it's the capabilities in terms of driving. What is it capable of driving if it's an amplifier or speakers? So what I'll try and distill down in the end is that this speaker has this tonality because I've tried it in this system. I've also confirmed it by switching it out different components, one at a time, and that I'm familiar with. And if it's giving a certain sonic sheen to every one of those components, more so, and you can determine the character sonically of what that component has, and then you have to be looking at what it's capable of driving. So I know that my Proax are a little bit difficult to drive. I know that some amplifiers, they sound a little bit slow, and sound grip and control isn't quite there. If you're looking at more affordable amplifiers, then that's not a fair test. There's nothing wrong with the amplifier. I don't expect £1,000. The Hagel H95, very good amplifier. sounds terrific with the Amphi and Argon ones, has a very neutral character. The reason I know that is because when I put the Amphi and Argon ones, which have a slightly cool, lean tonal character, that coolness comes on. When I switch it to my Proax that have a slightly warmer, richer character, that comes through. If I put on, you know, if I've got 5 or 6 different speakers, which I might not necessarily all speak about, and I can hear those different variations, I can tell, well, actually, the variations between all of these speakers is quite significant, because this amplifier is very neutral, but it doesn't really drive the Proax properly. So I'm not, that's, you know, I might mention that it's not capable of driving that, but then, it, you know, it drives the Amphi and Argon ones perfectly fine. So you just basically break it. You eventually form a picture, jigsaw puzzle. You just basically form, you just have to know where to put the pieces.
Right. It's just not easy for the average person. Like, you're a professional, you've done this now, you know how to match things.
I'm professional.
Okay, you're not. I would classify you as more professional than the average consumer out there. You've tested more gear. You understand the science behind some of the products and the engineering. And I mean, I think that even came through in your most recent video on your digital to digital. Iris. Am I saying that right?
Iris.
Right.
Digital converter.
Right. This is another fascinating product that it's hard to understand as an average consumer why it should exist. But this is taking a digital signal, essentially cleaning it up and outputting another purified digital signal. And I think in your test, you found that it does make a difference.
Yeah. So I obviously I don't do the measurements.
Right.
And measurements, it's an involved process to do measurements. I believe in measurements.
Right.
The day science and engineering is my background. I believe in measurements, but it's an involved process to do it. You need the right equipment. It takes a lot of time, and that's not really my interest. I'm really grateful, like I said, that the guys out there who do that provide that data. I think it's invaluable, and you can tell an awful lot about any product, whether it's a speaker, amplifier, DAC, or anything from the measurements. You can tell what's wrong with it. You can tell there's something wrong, there's something that it's not doing right. But I still, where I probably part company with the hardline objectivists is that ultimately, in terms of wanting to know whether I'd like a product, whether I like listening to it, I still have to listen to it. So at the end of the day, you know, that's the baseline. Something needs to measure well is the baseline. And the only exception with that is, I'd say, speakers, because I think there's people who like certain tonality, certain speakers, even though we're all, according to the research from Floyd Tool, supposed to like the same sound. I'm sure is the majority. There are people there who like different sounds. You know, people who like Klipsch speakers. There's people who like Harbuths, and they're two ends of a different spectrum. One's what you'd call very warm and rich, and the other one's very, you know, a little bit more forward in its and brighter in its presentation. So I don't think all speaker manufacturers go for a neutral tonal balance. I think that's where I think you find a lot of flavor. People impart their own little flavor, but that's, you know, the objectivists will be jumping up and down saying they're you know, they should be doing that, but you know, that's what they sell speakers. People like them, they enjoy them. The proof of the pudding and the eating. But yeah, so I believe in the objective data. I'm grateful that people do that. I personally, you know, my interest lies in basically explaining. I want people to understand what goes into the engineering of a product, that side of it, to get an understanding, because I think it does help you make a little bit more of an informed choice. Yes, by all means, have a look at the measurements. Someone will, if it's a popular product, someone will have measured it, and that will tell you quite a bit about it as well. But ultimately, I want to know what it sounds like, and give people hopefully a fairly objective, would be the wrong word because it's a subjective review, but gives somebody a fairly reliable and view of what that product is likely to sound like. And that's why you have to test it with multiple bits of gear to try and figure out what character it's imparting on all these different bits of gear, and if it's gear that you're familiar with, you can piece together a bit of a picture, and hopefully provide reasonably reliable information for people to make choice.
Right. Well, two things come up to me when people talk about measurements is, what is the ideal measurement? Like I've never seen it actually defined. Like, is it just a flat line? Is that the ideal measurement? Or what are we looking for? And then if we are saying it's close to some kind of flat frequency line across all frequencies, then if we get close to that, will it sound subjectively better than something that doesn't measure in that spectrum? Did that make any sense?
Yeah, if you're talking about speakers, electronics measure pretty flat.
Okay.
That's pretty much buttoned down. But amplifiers do not sound the same, even though if they measure flat, because all you're talking about is the frequency response. Speaker measurements are quite complicated, and there's a few standards that you can follow in terms of how to measure speakers. There's I think AES has one, CEDIA has one, I think there's an American one, ANSI or something.
Right.
They all have their different standards, and you can basically download those, follow those standards, and do those measurements. But if you're doing what is typically a measurement of a speaker, you're measuring from a meter away at the acoustic center of the speaker, which is somewhere around the tweeter on most speakers. And you do a frequency sweep in what they call a gated window, where you have to make sure the speaker's away from boundaries. And you basically, what you do is you know how long sound takes to travel directly from the speaker to the mic. And you've got, whatever 4 to whatever milliseconds or it is, and you kind of, in that gated window, capture the sound. So you're listening to the direct sound from the speaker. So that'll give you the frequency response directly on axes from a meter away. But you don't sit 1 meter away, and you're not listening to just the direct sound. So
exactly. So we're actually measuring a location where nobody sits, but we're getting really good measurements that are standardized at this 1 meter distance.
Yeah, and that does give you actually a very good indication of the tonality of the speaker. But there's other things you have to measure. Then the off-axis performance, and because there's a lot of reflected sound in rooms, and there's different ways of doing that. And there's also do waterfall plots to see if there's resonant frequencies at certain points with the stored energy, which means that a certain frequency will ring for longer. So there's sound power response, which is basically taking into account all the reflections. Then there's wide versus narrow dispersion speakers. So there's a lot that you can mess up with speaker measurements as well. And no speaker measures flat. And there's also, what you're measuring is, our brain doesn't hear individual frequencies, it lumps them together and smooths them out. So so what you're measuring isn't necessarily exactly the same as what you're hearing, unless it's got some kind of smoothing. I think there's 1/3 per octave filtering, I think they do on it to smooth out the response. I can't remember exactly, to get a more accurate, more realistic presentation of what you hear. Because if it's got a spike at certain frequency at, say, 1200 hertz, and then at 1250 it's down and it's back up, you won't hear that. It'll just smooth that out, because you hear in chunks of. So there's a lot involved in measuring correctly, and with speakers in particular, it's very easy to mess that up. And and you're only measuring really from about 500 hertz upwards anyway, because your room is dominant up to about 250 hertz. If you're measuring speaker, all you'll be hearing is your room. And from 250 to 500 hertz is probably a transition period between the two. So you can only reliably measure from about 500 hertz, which is mid-range and above. So the lower mids and the bass, that's primarily your room. So, but it tells you a lot. Measurements tell you a lot.
So what about the situation where something measures well and then to your ears doesn't sound well? How do you explain what we're not measuring, or those situations which come up? Like, it's not unheard of for that to happen.
I think things that measure well, and if the measurements are done right, and there's enough, and you've measured everything that you shouldn't measure. I mean, if you're measuring speakers, there's other things on amplifiers you need to measure.
Right.
But then it should sound okay. There shouldn't be anything that I think you can predict from the measurements. I'm not an expert on this in this area, but if you've got something measures well, I think you can fairly reliably, and it's done correctly, and there's enough of those the measurements, critical measurements have all been done. Right. It's fairly reliable that you will, that speaker, that device will perform reasonably well. Right. Whether you'd love it, and whether it's going to really well with your speakers, and that, you know, I don't think we've got there yet. I don't, you know. So for example, my ProAx measure reasonably well. The Hagel H95 measures reasonably well. It doesn't sound bad together, but that isn't the amplifier that I'd choose to use with my ProAx. And whether that would be revealed, I think it's you know, in the measurements, I don't know, but I don't think you can tell for definite whether you're going to be able to, whether you're going to love this amp. I'm pretty certain you can't tell that you're going to love something by looking at the measurements. Right. You're still going to have to listen to it and decide.
Right. Like, that kind of brings me into an interesting debate, which was also the topic of one of your articles, is, do you want everything all in one designed in an active speaker, or do you want to play around with all the different components you need and have a passive speaker?
That depends. That depends. There's a problem with this hobby.
It's a problem.
There's no straightforward answer to anything. Right. Everything depends on a whole bunch of other factors. So if you are painting in broad strokes, then active pound for pound should outperform passive, because you've basically, it has some technical advantages over a passive speaker. You've got amplifiers directly coupled to the drivers. I'm not talking about powered. The other thing we have to talk about,
another complicated,
is powered speakers. And there's manufacturers out there that have powered speakers, which are amplifiers with power amplifiers built into their speakers, who market their speakers as active. Active's got nothing to do with the powering of the amplifier. It's got to do with the crossover. Whether you've got the crossover, whether the crossover is a passive device full of resistors, capacitors, and inductors. Those are basically, they don't require any power. Those electrical components, the signal passes through them and it changes. Or whether it's an electronic crossover with transistors and diodes and stuff like that. Those devices require power. That's why they're called active, and they alter the signal. So there's a bunch of advantages. I think I mentioned it in the review, and I also did on my ATC SEM19 review, I explained what the benefits are. There's a bunch of technical advantages to active. There's much higher damping factor because you've got no crossover between the amplifier and the speakers. The designer knows exactly the characteristics of the amplifier that is going to match drivers, so they pick amplifiers to get the best out of them. So they'll choose a different amplifier module for the bass than for the tweeter if it's a two-way design. There's benefits of the fact that the crossover itself in a normal speaker can cause problems. They're non-linear devices, capacitors and inductors by their very nature. So, and you're dealing with a signal, you're breaking up the signal at low level, as opposed to, if in an active device, you're splitting the signal before it gets to the amp, and it's a low signal, as opposed to in a passive design, it's split up after the amplification. So there's more energy loss there. So there's a whole bunch of benefits of an active speaker. And also because you're putting everything in one box, it's more cost effective. So generally active would be better, but not always, because there are active designs. If you've got a really good passive amplifier, and you've got speakers that are really good and well matched to each other, you can get a passive system potentially to sound better than an active system.
Right.
You know, it's, I think actually that's something that I learned from what's his name, Peter at PMC, the founder of, Peter Thomas.
Yep.
Found PMC. They produce passive and active speakers, and he said that's his experience. It kind of mirrored what I thought, but it was nice for him, someone in his position, to confirm it. He said, well, you know, if you've got a humdinger of a passive amplifier that's just basically got to power 2 passive speakers, and then you've got to put 6 active amplifier modules into, you know, 2 3-way speakers, and they're not of the same quality, the passive will outperform it.
Right.
So, but a good, you know, I've heard some cracking active speakers.
Right.
So,
I guess I'm fascinated why there's not more active speakers, given their simplicity and technical advantages. You don't see a lot of them in the market. Do you have a reason?
You do in the pro audio market. And the audiophiles have always been slow to take that on board, because we like the gear.
Right.
You know, as much as we say, oh, it's all about the music, what, you know, yeah, of course it's all about the music. That's why you spend all your time watching YouTube videos of me bleed on about this and that, and look at articles, because it's all about the music. You don't care about the gear. Of course we care about the gear. We care about the gear. We like to fiddle with the gear. We like to think that we like to curate our own systems.
Right.
You know, the active, someone's done that job for you. So it's, you know, so look, where's the fun in that?
Right. Where's the fun in just having a simple box that plays beautiful sound, right?
Yeah,
where's the fun? I want to have 20 boxes that are all connected by a string of cables that I circle around the room to make it sound good, right? That's
yeah. Well, I think it's the thing that's changing is that the accessibility of gear. We've gone through this phase where dealers have dwindled, and whereas when I was doing this, you know, 25 years ago, you could go down to your local, whichever town you were in, there have been, you know, a hi-fi dealer in a small town, in larger places there have been several, and you had plenty of opportunity to go down there, have a listen to gear, and make decisions, and you know, that is, there's hardly any dealers left, so that is impossible. And we haven't quite got to the point where manufacturers have got not all of them anyway, have caught on to the fact that we'll actually just let people demo them at home. I think we'll get there. I think we'll eventually get to the point where all these manufacturers will say, listen, you can have everything on trial at home for 45 days, and if you don't, just return it. And just, you know, some will pay shipping and some will pay maybe part shipping or whatever. I think we'll eventually get there, but we're still in this transition period where dealers have disappeared, and people don't find it that easy, depending on where you are and which country you are in. It's very, very difficult to get gear. So that's why I think the reviews have kind of caught on as well. And I think the thing with YouTube reviews is that people like to feel that they're listening to someone who is who's just their opinion necessarily, tried it at home. It's not the establishment,
right?
And I think there's a little bit of skepticism. I don't know if you can counter that with E-acoustics. I don't. You consider yourself part of the establishment? You're probably not.
I've always been anti-establishment, because when we started back in '98, they were just the print magazines, and there were Stereophile and Absolute Sound, and they didn't even want to go online. Like, they thought online websites were just crazy. Like, everything had to be in print. Like, the internet didn't even matter. So for the first 5 to 10 years of the website, like, we were just fighting. The internet is relevant, online matters. People are researching this stuff. They're spending thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars on equipment. Your magazine comes out once per month and reviews 3 or 4 items, and a website can publish every day and do 80 articles per month or even greater. So I think they finally have learned that the internet and YouTube now, like, the YouTube is now at kind of the early phase of the internet was for a lot of these companies. They said it didn't matter. They didn't want to deal with an online publication. So it's interesting to kind of watch some of this come full circle, just in different circles.
We're about, so yeah, I've entered this space a little, in about another 5 years time, it might be, they might be all on board with what I'm doing, but not yet. But yeah, but do you find it different when you're dealing with different brands across different countries? Is it much different in the States if you're dealing with American brands, the British brands? You deal with everyone, don't you?
Yeah, we deal with everyone. I think what's interesting is certain products. I think I've kind of seen this, is some of these brands view these are products for YouTube, and these are products that are such high end that I only want them reviewed in a print magazine. And they differentiate that. I think that's what's come about. I've seen some of that, but I think that should change. There's no reason why the highest end speaker shouldn't be reviewed on a YouTube channel. Like you shouldn't be limited to 2,000 to 3,000 pounds or even 10,000. Like if you're able to fit it in your home and test it, then I think that's been the thing holding the industry back, is they just haven't embraced new technology. They've been continuing to go through their old dealer network, even selling direct. There were only a few companies doing that 20 years ago. And now, now if you look at a company like Sound United, they have Polk Audio, Bowers and Wilkins, Definitive Technology, Class A, all sold direct online now. And that was unheard of 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So that's part of the shift of, but you bring up an interesting point that people can't audition this stuff in an easy way. And that's why they turn to YouTube, because they need to see it and they value your opinion. And a lot of the guys on YouTube, including yourself, like you get access to more stuff than the average person. And you're able to compare it in a pretty unique and entertaining way. So that's why I like your channel. And I think it's one of the best ones. Yeah.
Oh, cheers. But it's surprising that a lot of the publications aren't doing more on it, really, YouTube. I think it's like you say, they're just comfortable with what they're doing. But what Hi-Fi occasionally, I think, uses a video on YouTube. Stereophile, again, if you look at their channels, they have YouTube channels,
right?
But they don't do much on that, I think, because they're just wedded to what they've been doing. Like you say, that shift from print to web-based took them a while to get their head around, and then there's another shift again. So I think they just haven't caught on to it yet. And also a lot of people, these journalists are happy, scribbling away and doing things. They don't necessarily want to be on camera.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm maybe one of those people who didn't want to be on camera.
Me too.
But I'm on camera now. So look for more Ecoustics people on camera, including myself and some others. So hopefully you'll see more of us. We know we need to be on YouTube and embrace the YouTube community. But it's like, I commend you for what you've been able to do and achieve so far at nearly 37,000 plus subscribers. I think you're at. It's hard to build that up.
I'm fortunate. I'm lucky where a stage of life where I could devote a bit of time to it, really. And that doesn't happen with I wouldn't have been able to do that 10 years ago. I wouldn't have been able to do that without the support of my wife. So I'm fortunate that I'm in a position where it does take a lot of work, because in fairness, it's the video, it's the B-rolling and the editing and the research and all the other stuff. The actual filming of a video doesn't take that long. It's all the other stuff that takes quite a lot of time. And I spend a lot of time listening. That bit I don't consider work, though. That's just fun.
That's the fun part.
I'm still like a kid in a sweet shop when something arrives and think, oh, let's open that. It doesn't matter whether it's 200 pounds or 2,000 pounds. I don't care. It's something that I haven't heard before. So, yeah, so it takes a bit of time, and you know,
Yeah,
I'm lucky I'm in a position where I can dedicate a bit of time to it at the moment. So and it's kind of, I just do what I want to do, really. It's, you know,
right.
because um
You're
you know,
you're your own boss, right? You can
yeah,
decide.
I'm old enough and ugly enough. I don't know who would want to employ me today, you know. So I've got to that stage where I just, you know, I just do what I want to do, and if people like it, they like it. If they don't, then you know what, it runs its
Right.
course. Thankfully, people, you know, there's a community of people who seem to like it. The manufacturers seem to like what I do. I think the manufacturers like the fact that I explain the engineering. That's always been an interest of mine. So that's
Right.
why I think they like that, because they're engineers. They
Right.
think, well, actually, someone's taking the trouble to actually explain how this product works a little bit. So they like that aspect. They don't like the fact that I compare it to other products, but they're going
Right.
to have to live with that, because I'm not here to advertise on their part. So they don't want, if they don't want the comparisons, don't send it. So
Right.
you know, and I think hopefully the audience think that actually he knows a little bit about this stuff, and he tries to give a fairly kind of, you know, reliable appraisal of what it does. I you know, like I said, I love my proacts and I love my exposures, but they you know, the
Right.
proacts would probably get an outstanding if I was reviewing them today, but the exposures probably get a highly recommended, because they've got a couple of flaws, but they're
Right.
not, you know, they're not the complete article, but they're still overall probably,
Right.
you know, a very fine sounding speaker and suit my tastes.
Right.
But I try, what I'm trying to say is that I put my own personal feelings aside. I think I'm always quite good at that. I think that's probably the engineering background. You're trying and be quite analytical about it. And I try and sit there and think, well, actually, just try and describe what it does and what it doesn't do. Of course, you a little bit of an emotional reaction to these things, but if you can just basically focus on what it does, what it doesn't do, then
Right.
you provide reliable information for other people, and they can then interpret that and decide, well, actually, that's for me, or it isn't for me.
Right. I don't
So,
think most people know you have a physics background, right?
well, I kind of do. My degree was in electronic engineering, and
Okay.
then when I worked for my father for 3 years, who had a small engineering consultancy, and I didn't really enjoy at that stage of my life the engineering aspect. So although I was mainly doing CAD work for him, really, rather than proper engineering, but I got out of that, and then I fell into the motor trade for about 12 years, which was good fun. And then when we were thinking about having a family, the hours of that, I thought, well, actually, I'll try and do something else. And I always wanted to. I was involved in selling cars. So I worked with some nice brands. I worked for Jaguar for 4.5 years, worked for Porsche for 5.5 years, and I got involved in sales management. And I like the mentorship and the teaching aspect of that.
Right.
So I thought at that time, when I was thinking of getting out, there is still a shortage of maths and science and engineering technology teachers in the UK. So they were basically, the government was giving bursaries and paying the tuition fees for people who wanted to retrain, who had physics related. There are not enough people with physics degrees, physics related degrees. So you had to do 1 year intensive physics courses, for like 1 year undergraduate course of physics. It was the postgrad, but it was done, they crammed in the syllabus for the first year undergraduate. So people who had physics A levels could do a little bit more physics. And then you had to do another year training to do your, what they call your PGCE here in the UK. There's 2 years of training, and then you qualify. Then you have to do a year when you get a job as a NQT, newly qualified teacher, and then you get your wings, basically. So I did that for about, well, all in all, it was about 5 years.
Oh wow!
And once I was teaching secondary science. But because you can teach once you're qualified, you can teach whatever subject you like within reason. But I did a bit of maths tutoring, because I kind of enjoy maths, so I did a bit of helping kids get through their GCSEs and A-level maths. And then we came up here, and I was ready to take a break really. My son was 1 when we moved up here,
Right.
out of London, up into the countryside, and we just enjoyed being a stay-at-home dad for a few years, and then
Right.
I was doing a bit of private tutoring,
Right.
but I was actively teaching
Right.
in the last 2-3 years.
Oh, keep going. Sorry.
No, and then that's it. And then I started this channel, literally less than 2 years ago. And that wasn't supposed to be anything other than just a bit of fun.
Well, that was my next question. What was the first video like, and how did you feel doing it?
I think I've only just got past the rabbit in the headlights phase of sticking the camera on, going, okay, the camera's on, I better speak. So I think I've finally, I wouldn't say, I mean, this is more natural speaking, but when you're trying to talk to a camera, and you've got to deliver content, and you're sitting there thinking, right, okay, because I don't script it. This is what I want to chatting to my patrons. I don't script it. What I have, I'm listening to this person, and that's actually tell a lie. I script the bit where I'm talking about design. The bit where I say, this is, this measure, this is this wide, that bit, it's all on camera. There's a little section where I'm talking about the design features that I write down. It's about a page of A4 where I write down. So there's obviously facts that you need to remember. So I may as well, and I'm going to show the product. So there's no point in me. So that bit is scripted. The rest of it, the intro, the talking about the technical insights, the sound quality, the setup, the conclusion, there's a standard format that I do. I kind of sit down and I used to take a few notes. I don't even do that now. I just listen to it. Okay, right. And occasionally I might take some notes, but generally I don't. And then on the day I'll sit there and think, right, okay, we're going to talk about this. So the next one will probably be either these speakers or the person. Right, you're going to do an intro, so I'll have the camera in front. What are you going to say in your intro? So I'll take a few takes and I'll finally figure out what I want to say. So that process takes, and that way, kind of balance between it being fairly spontaneous, because I'm figuring it out as I'm saying it, and I haven't said it. It's not said off a teleprompter. But because you're trying to remember everything that you want to say, it's like, your brain's like whirring ahead. Think what the next thing you're going to say, otherwise you're going to stumble over your words. So sometimes you get about 3 sentences in, and then you go and you think, I have to start again. It's frustrating.
Oh man.
So it robs you of your personality, because you're trying to, it's artificial being on camera, and second, you're trying to deliver. You're trying to remember everything you're going to say without hesitation.
Right.
And it's awkward.
And I think you're in a room by yourself too, like speaking to nobody other than the camera, or to everybody, right?
Yeah, it'd be even worse if there was an audience. Hopefully it comes across. I try and be myself as much as you can be yourself. But I always see myself as a bit stiff when I'm doing those, because you're having to. This is why this is quite nice. I'm hoping that if we, like I say, this is the first one that I'll put this on my channel. If people enjoy this, just the ramblings of this audiophile idiot.
You mean me? I hope we're not talking about you.
I'm talking about me. So because you can be yourself, because you have someone else to talk to. It's a conversation. If I asked you to turn the camera on, speak for 2 minutes,
it would not be good. I can tell you right now.
It's a different process. It's a different process.
Was there
you're getting very natural in front of the camera. I remember when you were first thinking about your first podcast, you were thinking, oh God, but that went really well, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I was nervous just on the audio podcast that we have launched. Those are getting more fun and easier. This is my first video podcast, you might say, with Taryn. So thank you for that.
It doesn't show.
Well, thank you. I need a better background. Sorry about the background. You can make all kinds of
lights. I don't know what the hell's going on here, but like I say, video production quality was never my strong suit.
So I guess I'm interested. Did you have a breakout video where you got to one and you're like, oh, this one really took off and I'm going to double
Yeah,
down?
I think I did one on my top 5. It's still the most viewed video, and it's bleeding awful, really. The video quality. I think I've got a puffer jacket on because it was December. I think
Okay.
I think it was December when I did it, and I'd been out, and
Yeah.
I'd had a cold, and actually I think you can tell at the beginning I had a cold, and my voice sounds thick.
Right.
And I sat down there. I thought, oh, it's in the other room, which is over there, my son's playroom. And I thought, I'll stick the camera. It was my iPad, and I don't know. I'm not sure if even there's a mic. It's just me recorded off my iPad. I've got a puffer jacket on inside, and I was feeling cold. And I thought, there's only about 10 people. Only about 10 people are going to watch this anyway. What difference does it make? So just like to feel warm and cozy.
Right.
And I spoke about my top 5 inexpensive tweaks, which I should probably do an update on, although I think they might be the same top 5 inexpensive tweaks.
Right.
And that's got like 366,000 views.
Wow.
I mean, at the time it went, I think I had about 200-300 subscribers, and it went to 5,000 after that video. And I got something like 100,000 views after about 2 weeks. So that but I look back at those, and they're still on there, and I think it reminds me of the journey, keeps you humble. But
well, at that time, I don't know if you've explained this on your channel. Were you always a British audiophile from the first one? Like, how did you pick that name?
Yeah, well, I thought, so one of the things was I wanted audiophile because I think audiophile is maligned, and it's snobby audiophile idea of what an audiophile is, and I wanted the audiophile name because I thought, well, actually, I am an audiophile. I'm proud to be an audiophile. I'm not one of those people who judges people on how much they spend on a hi-fi system. If you go, only thing that that's something I respect about Steve Gutenberg. He says the only thing that you need to do to qualify for an audiophile is that if you enjoy music and you care about sound quality, you're an audiophile. Doesn't matter whether you're listening on your phone with earpod, Apple earpods. If that's all you can afford, I've got a friend who's got edifier, one of the powered edifiers. I think it was less than £100, powered speakers, hooks it up to his computer and his TV, cares about quality, but he's not in a position to spend a lot of money. He's an audiophile,
right?
So I wanted it to represent. I thought in my small little way, if I can, I can bring that word back to not mean someone who's got a silver spoon up their backside and toffee nosed and all of that. And then the British thing was because I saw a lot of Americans doing it.
Right.
Thought there's hardly anybody over here, and there's a lot of gear. And there's 2 things. I mean, obviously my background, I'm of Indian ethnicity and origin, and I'm very proud of that. But I was born here, brought up here, and I think we've had some wonderful brands over the years when it comes to cars. It's another real passion of mine. I should have been reviewing cars, really. I'm much more qualified to review cars than hi-fi gear. What would you call a car lover? British what? But I thought, I want to celebrate some of these British brands that nobody hardly knows about, like Creek Audio and stuff like that. But when you contact them, you go, who are you? And YouTube, what's that? YouTube. See, leave that with us. That's what you say. Contact the little. So that was the love for those brands, which I still love those brands, whether they send me products or. I still love ProAct speakers. Well, I love my ProAct speakers. Don't know if I love the new ones.
Right. But, you haven't even tried them yet.
I still like Rager amplifiers. I've heard them over the years. I've heard loads of ProAct speakers in other environments, but and a lot of these little brands. And I was really pleased when Sugden was one of those, actually. Sugden was one of those brands which, when I contacted them, they don't have a marketing department. It's literally just a workshop somewhere. Right. And they've got a guy who's a really good guy who actually looks after their PR. So they've actually gone back one step and got someone who looks after their PR. And same reaction, who are you? Why should we send you? And kind of, I said, well, actually, maybe check it out. But he was a good guy. He said, actually, you know what? I like what you're doing. And we had a conversation. We had a little bit of rapport. He said, let me speak to him. Let me speak to him. guy who runs it, and they're a million miles. They're a million miles from what you'd call corporate. The complete upper.
Right.
They're a total cottage industry. It's literally the girl's name's written on the thing who builds your amplifier, you know, and it's hand built thing. And I thought, but I just they sent me a product. And I was stoked because you know, tiny little British brand that hardly ever gets reviewed, they probably wouldn't go anywhere other than probably to a couple of print magazines, and they took a chance, sent me a product. I liked it. If I hadn't liked it, I'd send it back. That would have, but I'd have sent it back, and that would have been the end of that. But I did like it, you know, and it built like it. And I'd love to get more of those little brands, but like I say, you know, they don't have, they're not on board.
Right. I think the smaller the brand, the more they could be hurt by a review, and that's their. But at the same time, if they're making a good product, they should want it reviewed and they should want to tell people about it. So it's I don't understand that mentality, because wouldn't you want people to talk about what you've spent thousands of hours perfecting? Like,
I think that they don't get it. You know, engineers they're engineering companies, aren't they? At the end of the day, some engineer who builds a product, he likes it, it sells. He can only build 10 of them. He sells 10 of them. What does he care? You know?
Right.
And like I say, they don't want to. You know, if they've been going for 30 years and they've got 2 publications that they know are going to be fair to them and do a reasonable job of reviewing the product, they'll stick with that. Why take a chance on someone who might be? I think it'll change once the YouTube space is more recognized, like you say, and once, you know, I've been doing it longer and the word gets out there, because by osmosis, people, small industry. And the other thing is COVID over the last 2 years, so I haven't been to any trade shows. So I'm, you know, since I started this channel, I haven't. Last time I went to a trade show was at Bristol in the February of, where are we, 21, February 19, just before COVID lockdown. And I went as a regular punter, you know. Right. I'd probably be going back this year as a regular punter as well. So, I mean, haven't had the opportunity to speak to lots of people.
Sorry, I interrupted you like 3 times.
No, that's right. You carry on.
No, I was just going to comment on the shows, the lack of shows, the lack of access to equipment. It's definitely leading people to YouTube, and the YouTube algorithm is rewarding YouTubers in a way that the Google search algorithm isn't rewarding publications. I think that's another interesting, because you get subscribers and they get notified every time.
Sorry, explain that to a dunce like.
Explain that. Okay.
How that works.
So well, you know how YouTube recommends videos and related videos. So there's that aspect of, once you're in the YouTube ecosystem, they don't want you to leave. So they're concerned about more viewing time within YouTube. So if your viewers are staying on your channel longer, then YouTube's going to reward that with more inserted ads, more recommendations. They're going to, if they have a choice of recommending a British audiophile video or another review from another YouTuber, they'll be like, well, the viewer that watches a British audiophile stays longer, so we're gonna, so YouTube may recommend that. And that's part of the virtuous cycle of a lot of the YouTuber growth. On the publication, on the online side, there's no subscribe button that will notify every time there's a new article. Like, we do have a newsletter and you can subscribe to that. You can put in your email, but we don't email you every time there's a new article. It's like, and even if you follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, they won't even notify you every time there's a new article, because of how their algorithm works. So it's harder. It's become harder for a online website to reach the same audience that you're reaching on YouTube. So I don't know. Did that explain?
Yeah, Yeah, no, it explains. Well, you know me, I'm kind of a social media. I've kind of, I don't know
Right.
what it
We're
is.
going to get you on social media. You
Yeah, I
can't
don't know what it.
find Taryn anywhere but
Well,
on
I've never
YouTube
done.
right now. Right.
I've done it. I've kind of, you know, people, my friends laugh. Honestly, they say, "Well, you on YouTube?" Honestly, of all the people, can barely answer a text. So you know, I've never done Facebook, Twitter. It's never. I don't know why. It just makes me a bit weird, I suppose. But I've never done it in my private life. I kind of. I came out of. I stopped work. I left Porsche in 2000 and what was it? 2009. So was it that big a deal then? I can't. We had people who dealt with our marketing side, so we had I didn't need to do a lot of it.
Right.
Ran a sales team. I didn't need to do a lot of it then. It was all email. I spent all my day on the phone and on email. So I kind of came out of it then, and I haven't never done it in my personal life. So it's really with this channel. But I've never been on Facebook, never been on Twitter. My friends laugh. Only got WhatsApp. I only got WhatsApp about 3 years ago because there was a parents group for when my son was at school where they used to send information. And I thought, actually, I better get on that. There's just basically other ways of offending people. Yeah, but it's more opportunities for me to offend people by not responding.
Right.
So you know, I'm notorious because of my phone. I'm notorious. People have it wedded to them, and they're constantly looking at their phone. I might go a day without looking at my phone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, thing important going on. I think, well, actually, I don't need to. So I'm just an oddball, really, I suppose. So my friends laugh. They say, well, if I ring you, you won't answer anyway. So I said, well, leave a message. I'll call you back. So but what I do on my channel is I try and respond to every comment. That's more because I take a more professional. That's my personal life I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But with the channel, I try and respond to every comment that I see, unless someone's being, if they're being abusive, I delete it. But if they disagree or being impolite, I'll allow them to, if you put it in a public space, that you're fair picking. So those I won't very respond to, but if I'll try and respond to every single comment. I don't know how long I keep that going for, because it takes a while. There's 37,000 subscribers, and I respond to every comment. So I'm good with that, but I've never.
I got to go back. I got to go back to you not checking your phone for a day. Like that's a record. I don't know. For not to be able to look at your phone, that just tells me you're probably enjoying the music, and you're in a much better space than a lot of people. So I want to be able to do that. I want to not check my phone, listen to the system at the quality that you have, and maybe that will get me there.
Yeah, because I think the reality is, if there's no immediate, I think it's amazing how life's changed. These things have been around for about 20 years. Now we're wedded to them. Mm-hmm. And I see it as a tool, and if I need to use it, and I'm probably, because I am quite private, I suppose, in certain ways, I'm quite protective of my own private space, which seems strange, but I don't want to be constantly interrupted. If it's something important, and it'll probably buzz. If it's something important, it'll ring 5 times. I'll probably go and have a look at it. If it's otherwise, it's so I can go. Right. I don't feel the need to be on the phone all the time, but I am, like I say, I am an oddball. It is a rarity. Most people like to say, my parents, my dad's 80 in about a few days, and he's constantly on his phone.
That's so, what happens.
Put your phone down, Dad. What are you doing? I'm sitting there thinking, and my mum's constantly on Facebook and everything. It's just me. So
are they both watching your videos? Are they spending all their time watching your videos?
I doubt it. I doubt it. I think I did one cable video. Actually, that cable video that I did that one because I've got basically hardly anything done over the summer. Lesson learned. It's about 6 products here that I need to get reviewed now, because I did sod all over the summer basically, because it's just impossible with kids, and wife was home, kids was home. I thought I just managed to be able to do lots of listening, but couldn't film anything. So they went for a couple of days on holiday, so I managed to get the bulk of the cable video filmed the bit with me to camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was supposed to go down to, well, went down to London because my dad got tickets to the Lord's, it's England playing. So that's, so he's supporting India, of course. And I'm sitting there thinking, he's going, who are you supporting? I go, well, I've got a bit of a conflict here, I suppose. Anyway, I went down for that, and I thought, I've got to get this video out. I haven't done a video for ages on this channel, and I want to get this cable video done. So I thought, well, actually, do you know what? I'll do all the B-roll and the editing when I'm down there. I'm going to be down there for a couple of days. So I packed the cables in and the camera in my rucksack, and off we went. And I did the B. You look at that video, the cable B-roll shots that are done are in my sister's bedroom. You don't live there anymore. She lived abroad, but they're done in the bedroom. Did all the editing there the next day.
Right.
So I managed to get one video out in about a month, I think. But
well, that's more. Yeah, that's pretty good though. One is more than we've done until this one. So, but yeah, you do get rewarded on YouTube, I think, for doing more consistent videos. Have you noticed that? Yeah,
I think I try and do one a week. I'm trying to get it to a point where it's going out Friday night, although, and I'm getting quicker. It is getting quicker. But the bits, like I say, the filming, that, even though it's not scripted, the bit that where I'm working out what I want to say. So if I'm doing the Burston one on Tuesday, I'll start at 10:30. By about 2:30, 3 o'clock, I'll have filmed all of that. The only bit that I won't have done is the bit where I've got off camera. The only bit that I do off camera, the whole segment is done, the design bit. So the next day, what I'll do is I'll write down, okay, Burston measure this weighs this, it's that, it's got this feature on the front, that feature on the back, and then that will be read out. And then it takes me about a good day to edit it, and then another day to insert all the B-roll stuff. That takes ages. And then it's the listening, and the dealing with manufacturers and responding to comments like that. So these guys who do one a day, I don't know how they do it. I mean, the other thing is, because I do the technical aspect of it, it's easy to get those things wrong. And there's times in some of my earlier videos, there's certain things. I think there's one which I did where chord mojo and stuff. There's something that you think that you've had because you've held the belief for 20 years. You think it's a fact. Right. Well, it's not necessarily a fact just because you've held the belief for 20 years. Right. So you kind of, if you want to kind of fact check a little bit what you're saying if you're going to put stuff out there, because if you're going to talk about these things in engineering terms, you want to get 99% of it right. You can never get 100% of it right, but you want to try and do a little bit better, So that takes sometimes a bit of time, and I get a video done a week. It takes quite involved. I would love to get to the point where I would get 2, because it'd be nice to get. I think that would help the channel, but I haven't got there yet. So, do you remember what you said that you wanted to correct, or have you corrected it in a later video yet, or do you want to correct it now? No, I think I was talking about 24-bit resolution, and it basically being more high. I think it was more higher, something to do with higher number of bits, and it increasing the resolution. And I should have said dynamic range, because it increases dynamic range. But yeah, it's it's like trivial. It's a small thing but it's easy to misinterpret or to get confused on some of this stuff. Cable video, the first one, not this one, the cable video, because these were done very early on when I was doing it a couple of months. I spoke about the capacitance and the inductance being frequency dependent, and that is like schoolboy error in terms of they're not. It's the reactance, which is basically the resistance part of it. That is frequency response. The capacitance, the number of microfarads, and the inductance, the henries, which is measured in henries, which is the amount of actual capacitance and inductance those components have. That doesn't change. It's the actual load that changes with frequency. I thought, you idiot. When I did that, I thought, oh my God, how the hell did you make that mistake? And And I thought, I literally could, bless him, he's probably not alive. My old analog electronics lecturer would have thought, oh, I probably taught you that in the first week. But it'd been 15, 20 years since I'd even looked at this stuff. So I thought, I'll let you go, give yourself a bit of a break.
Right. Yeah, I think very few people though would even catch that though. Like you gotta be.
But it's, you know. So anyway, the point I'm making is that you want to kind of fact check things a little bit, you know, to make, like this digital to digital converter. So, okay, well, I know, I get the concept. But you have to kind of just, you know, let me go and have a look at a couple of articles, just remind myself that I know what I do know, and then you pick up a lot of things on there that you don't know as well.
Right.
Okay, and then you want to basically, you can't rely on one source because that could be wrong. That's happened before as well. You better check it, you know, and see where you're getting your information from, and just make sure it's reliable. And then you kind of distill it down. So, you know, I know bits. There's all those bits that always little gaps that you want to fill in, and you always want to make sure that you check it out to make sure that it's reasonably accurate before you put it out there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the digital to digital thing is, most people don't know what that is or why they would need one. So that's a new, it's not a new technology, like it's been around. No. But what's causing it to become more released in new products? What's changed?
I'm not sure. Denfrips have obviously got these digital to digital converters, and I think part of the problem is the name, isn't it? The digital to digital part. And people think, well, all it's doing is, why would I want to? I can buy a cheap little switching device on Amazon that will switch from coax to optical, or from USB converter or something. You can buy one of those for 30 quid. Why the hell would I want to spend £3,000 on one, or £1,000, £600 worth? The one that I reviewed was £600.
Yeah,
and it's not. That's not what it's about. And that video, which I just did, went out, you know, just did. So that was quite techie. So there's things about the quality of the clock and the oscillators in the clock. So I was aware of bits of it. I knew there were grades. I couldn't remember exactly the name, what the differences were. So I had to like, I know what a voltage oscillator ones, and I think I've heard of the oven control ones, but which one's better, I couldn't remember. And so I had to go and double check that stuff. So basically, it's you know, it's the quality of the clock. There's two things. You want to reduce the noise and you want to reduce the jitter. And you could, objectivists will argue, once the noise is down below a certain level, it makes no difference. There's a whole bunch of people who would say, well, actually, that isn't the case, that we can still, for some absurd reason, perceive a difference even when it's below 120 dB. Right. There isn't enough research to give you a definitive answer. But anyway, the point is that it improves the sound quality. I could hear a difference in sound quality. One's reducing noise. The other thing is that objectively it does reduce jitter. And if you reduce jitter, that can have a beneficial impact as well.
Right. So for people that aren't following this at all, what we're talking about is all the technology that's been built into CD players, essentially separated into different devices. So each part of what used to be all inside of a CD player, converting a digital CD, converting the digital bits on the CD to analog, we're now separating out that circuitry into separate boxes. Is that a interesting?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, basically, there's language that's spoken internally inside the CD player, and when you're outputting it into your DAC, that's kind of converted to those separate bits are put together. And if you separate them out and basically do a better job of dealing with each of the individual components, and it gives your DAC a much easier life. It provides it with a much cleaner signal, and then that can have a beneficial impact on sound quality.
I mean, I guess I'm confused, maybe other people are too, is we're 40 years into nearly 40 years since the CD came out. Yeah. Why hasn't this math been solved? Like the math of converting a digital signal into an analog signal. Like, I mean, we've solved it because we can hear it, but there's not a standard that if you do it this way, it sounds the best, or whatever the best is.
Well,
or...
I think they've tried. They've got PCM, which is what we mostly listen to, isn't it?
Right.
Code modulation, and then you got DSD, which is an attempt to try and improve it.
Right.
But it's not a straightforward process. There's a lot going on, and there's things with bandwidth, with noise, with filtering, digital.
Right.
The digital, the stuff that basically comes out of a DAC is not. The digital transformation is not perfect by any means. There's all kinds of artifacts. That's why you have all these, when you get a DAC and you have these different filters, which, like minimum phase, linear phase, and various other ones, slow roll off, fast roll off, etc., etc. It's because when you convert that digital signal into, if you put a simple sine wave into a DAC, you do not get a simple sine wave out. There's pre-ringing, post-ringing. There's all kinds of issues,
Okay.
and they haven't got that. They can't do that perfectly. So they're different filters that try and have someone has one problem, another has a different problem, and I think hopefully we'll get there someday. Rob Watts seems to think that he gets closer with his 1 million taps, he thinks, because he says that sync function, which he requires, which is, from what I can understand, I think there's, I don't want to get too techie here, but an interpolation filter, which is what fills in the gap between one digital sample and the other. In order to do that perfectly, you need, there's different ways of doing it. He uses something mathematically that's called a sync function. And in order to do that really well, you need an awful lot of processing and run that algorithm, what he considers 1 million times, 1 million taps. So he seems to think that he's got closer to getting it very, very good, right, with the M scalar and whatever the Dave, some solving the noise floor, some of the problems with DACs. But there's and if vinyl enthusiasts out there rubbing their hands, I knew it was all rubbish. That digital, it's all rubbish. Yes, but there's all kinds of problems with vinyl as well.
Right. Right.
The whole system is this whole. Forget vinyl and digital. There's problems with 2-channel audio.
Right.
Floyd Toole talked about it years and years ago, that you can't really get a proper sound feel out of 2 speakers. It does a reasonably good job. It's amazing. It does as good a job as it does, right. But we're a long way away from reproduced music sounding like the real thing.
Right. Well, the spatial audio era is beginning. It's just now that Apple Music has announced Dolby Atmos tracks. There's also Sony 360 reality audio on some other platforms where you can get a immersive sound field, is the best way I can describe it. But it takes having more speakers, which 2 is hard enough to get right.
Well, who's going to mix them? Right. Who's going to mix the tracks? Have you listened to modern mixes of music, and they can't get a stereo mix together right? Who's mixed multi-channel? That's the problem. I mean, multi-channel audio is the way to go if you can accommodate the speakers. Right. Then you can get you'd get a much more realistic sound field if you got your system. First, for example, most people have trouble accommodating 2 speakers in their home and setting them up correctly. Right. Let alone 16 or 12 or even 5. If you went for a basic surround sound system, you've got 5. So that's getting them. You need amplification for them, so the cost goes up because you now got 5 speakers, amps, and a processor. You need to accommodate 5 speakers, and then you need to set them up correctly. Right. And then you need material that's mixed by someone who knows how to. They know how to mix movies. Right. There's a lot of money in there. That's big industry. They know how to mix movies. but mixing multi-channel audio for music reproduction, hardly anyone knows how to do it.
Right. It's all new, but do you see yourself reviewing some of that on your channel, or are you going to?
I mean, I was into home cinema at one point. I mean, I haven't looked at it for, you know,
Right.
well over a decade, so I'm completely out of touch. But yeah, I had a home cinema system. And all my stereo systems, even though it gets criticized, are connected to a TV, because I don't listen to the TV. Who wants to listen to a bleeding TV? Honestly, it's awful. I can't even listen to the news on the TV.
Yeah,
you know, so it's you know, once you get used to your hi-fi connected to your TV, after a few months, you're not going back. So so I've got a 2-channel or 2.1 channel system, and most of the information's comes through there anyway. So you know, if you've got a good 2-channel setup and you're setting it up for a very small little sweet spot with 1 seat, you can get a very good sound. Problem with 2-channel is that its stereo image falls apart if you move, you know, a little bit left and right. So it's only good for, it's a very solitary experience, isn't it? It's not, you're sitting on a 3-seater couch, it's only the person in the middle who's getting
right.
decent stereo image.
Right. Yeah, that's the classic audiophile, like sitting alone in a chair in the middle of the room.
That's me.
That's you.
That's me. You. They go to bed, I sit here, listen to music. That's my piece. If it wasn't doing that, I'd be doing something a lot more destructive. You know, I'd be drinking or smoking, doing something I shouldn't be doing. So I don't drink. I do drink, but you know, there'll be other vices. This one's much healthier. So it's what you do. I mean, you know, it puts you. That's the great thing about music, isn't it? It puts you in a different space, a different mental space, emotional space.
Yep.
And you know, that's why I spend so much. I never tire of it.
Right.
You know, I spend more time listening now than I've ever done in my life. I still never tire of it.
That, I mean, that just speaks to the joy of why you do what you do, the joy of listening to music. Like that's really why we're here. If you're not enjoying the music, then all the gear in the world can look nice on a rack or a wall or whatever, but you need to just enjoy the music.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of, I think it's kind of like a slightly Zen space, which is just about me. You know, I mean, I have it in the living room. It's in our family room.
Right.
And it's enjoyed by my wife. My son has his own the other system in his playroom. But I'm not saying other people don't enjoy it. But my listening pleasure really comes from when I'm sitting here and there's no one else around, and I'm just and I sit there and actually, you know, it just takes you out of your world for a little while. You know, that I listen all the time when I'm doing other stuff as well. It's not that I have to sit here in the sweet spot and critically listen all the time, but I enjoy that. I enjoy doing that as well.
Well, so, I want to thank you. Like, I've gone way over the time I thought we were going to talk. I think we are like an hour, 45 minutes. I think.
Wow.
I think
okay.
I think it's supposed to be 45 minutes. So thank you for everybody who has stuck around. This has been a lot of fun. I hope we do it some more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been I'm honored to be on a British Audiophile channel. So
well, thank you for coming, and thank you, and I know it's going to be available on E-acoustics and your platform as well, so people can find it there. But it's been great, Brian, to have you here. Well, I mean, we've chatted. We do this all the time. Well, not all the time. We do this periodically, and it's good that we can film it, and hopefully, if people enjoy it, we'll do some more of these. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.